Welcome into another edition of the FutureSox RoundUp. My name is Elijah Evans, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host Jeff Cohen. We are back today with another episode of the Roundup, and a lot to talk about, Jeff. We're entering these exciting few weeks coming up. As we record here on Monday the 8th, the MLB draft kicks off this coming Sunday on the 14th, where the White Sox will pick 5th, as well as 43rd and 68th in the first day of the draft. There'll be plenty of other picks to follow, but a really exciting time for the White Sox in the draft. Plenty of good players will be available at the 5th pick. Last week we did a full draft preview with Pete Flaherty, who laid out all the options for the White Sox at the 5th pick, some later round guys to target, a bunch of other different things. So go back and listen to that if you are excited about the draft and getting ready for draft season. But we have a ton to talk about within the system because this week was a big week, Jeff. There was a few players that really went off, and there was this line of promotions. We've been talking about it for months. The promotions started to come. I was able to report a few of these this week, and then we got, I think, 6 promotions in the past week and a half. So a lot going on, a lot of prospects getting deserved promotions, and we're going to talk about all of it right now. So how you doing, Jeff?
Doing great. That's an understatement. It was a huge week for the system,
Yeah.
and just up and down the system, from the guys who are just starting out to the guys who are making the major leagues and all the guys in between. Just a lot of great news this week to get to.
Yeah, 100%. Before we get into all this news, we're going to talk about promotions at each level. There was guys, 3 guys that went to AAA, a few guys that went to AA, one guy that went to Winston. Everybody is getting moved around this whole system, honestly. But we'll start with the records going through. Some of these teams are getting real exciting. We'll talk about it soon, but Charlotte is 38-46. Dare I say that I think they're going to finish with a winning record, Jeff? It's kind of crazy to think about, but Charlotte's only 8 games under 500 after being, I think, 15 under 500 at one point earlier this season, and they just got a lot of talent this week. So Charlotte is looking on the upswing. Birmingham right now is 45-36. They're actually in a bit of a rut right now, but a big part of that is they've lost a lot of talent. Guys that have got promoted, obviously Thorpe going to the big leagues, and then a handful of guys this week now going to AAA. A lot of talent has been moved off that roster, but still a very good team. Already clinched a playoff spot. They're going to get some more reinforcements soon. Winston-Salem sits at 38-43, kind of that middling record generally for the most of the season. Kannapolis at 48-33. Kannapolis continues to be impressive. A lot to talk about down there this week, especially the ACL White Sox 19-27, and the DSL White Sox 7-17 on the season. So overall, a lot of excitement, but really this week is all about these promotions and everything going on at each level with new players on each team, and just more and more players going to be added. And then before you know it, once we get to the draft next week, and then the trade deadline in 3 weeks, a ton of talent is going to get added to an already very strong and impressive farm system that we've been talking about all season long. We'll start at the major league level, though, Jeff. There's 3 guys that came into this season as, kind of considered to be potential major league impact guys, and all 3 of them had a big week this week, and all 3 of them have, looked the part in recent weeks at least. We'll start with Drew Thorpe. I was able to check his start 2 weeks ago in person, and then his last start this week, another good one. Thorpe he's going to be a pitcher. This is a guy, I made a tweet the other day that went up crazy a little bit. And this is going to be at the very least, a mid-rotation arm for a long time, Jeff. I don't know if you disagree with me there, but I feel pretty confident in that statement right there. The guy turns in a quality start every time he takes the mound. It's just solid. It's consistent. It's steady. Other than his 1 blow-up game against the Diamondbacks in his second career start, he has allowed 2 or less runs in 4 of his 5 starts now. This past start, another 1 run, 6 1/3 innings. His last 3 starts in a row have all been at least 6 innings, all of them under 2 runs. It's just consistent and solid, and he throws strikes, and that's just what you're going to get from Drew Thorpe.
Yeah, I'm blown away, actually. I mean, he was dominant in AA, but you thought there'd be a few bumps in the road when he got in the major leagues, but looks great.
He had one bump, and since then he looks really, really good.
Yeah.
So we'll see where it goes. But Thorpe, it's hard not to love what you're seeing from him, and it's hard not to love a guy that just throws strikes, and that's just all he does is just throw strikes. I mean, you look at Thorpe pitch, and it's just he attacks the zone. He doesn't back away from anybody, regardless of who he's facing. We'll see it against some stronger lineups, right? It's been some weaker lineups the past few starts he's made, so I'm looking forward to seeing him against a Guardians or a Twins lineup or some of these other American League teams that are strong, Orioles, Yankees, whatever it may be, right? So this week he's going to get a start against the Twins. I'm excited to see that. And then beyond that, he's going to get some harder starts later in the season, but he'll be in the rotation the rest of the year. He's going to be in the rotation next year. I think you can pretty much pencil Drew Thorpe into this rotation moving forward at the way he's looking so far. On the other side of things, Jonathan Cannon, Jeff, has also looked really good. I mean, this is a guy that we kind of, to a degree, I think we slept on him a little bit in comparison to some of these other pitching prospects. And he's just, we talked about before, this is a floor guy. He's not necessarily a ceiling guy, but Cannon's doing everything to blow us out the water to a degree right now, right? He's just continually putting together really good games. After a game, he gave up 5 runs on June 23rd, 5 earned runs, 8 total runs. That was a game where he got pulled in the second inning. He didn't have it, and he's bounced back now with 2 straight starts of really solid ball. This last week, he went through 6 innings of 1 run ball. It just another guy that just is giving you good innings, and that's something that the White Sox really don't have from a lot of other guys. Before early this season, right? It was Crochet and it was Fetty, and everybody else was giving you pretty poor innings, right?
Right.
Canton and Thorpe now in this rotation are giving you a solid innings almost every time they touch the mound, with a few bumps in the road. But Cannon looks good.
Yeah, it looks terrific. Again, 2 starts ago, he came so close to a complete game. I think that says it all, right?
100%. So it's great to see those 2 guys have really earned themselves rotation spots. I think they'll finish the season in the rotation. Maybe they're a little careful with Cannon's innings at this point, but generally speaking, I think these are 2 guys that are going to be in the rotation the rest of the season. They deserve to be, and they're going to enter, if things keep going this direction, right, they're going to enter 25 with rotation spots, pretty locked up, honestly, with all these other prospects coming up. But these 2 are proving it at the major league level right now that they deserve to be there. Another guy that's really turned things up a notch in recent weeks, and someone who I think, I've always been a fan of his, and I've always thought he has a lot of talent, but it hasn't come through at the major league level. It's always been like he goes to AAA, he dominates, comes back up to the big leagues, and struggles. Lenyn Sosa has looked really good of late, Jeff. He's been really solid recently, and after a slow start to the season, gets pushed back down to the minors after less than a month of the season this year. He comes back up. He came back up on May 31st, and now in June and July, so about a little less than a month and a half, Sosa looks like a major league player. I'm not sure he's a future starter by any means, but generally speaking, has been really hot the past week. This past week, in his last 7 games, he hit .419 with a .613 slugging percentage. He went 13 of 31, some nice quality hits, minimized the strikeouts, only 4 strikeouts in his past 7 games, as opposed to a lot more earlier on. His past 15 games, hitting .304, .328, .464, so almost an 800 OPS over his past 15 games. Only 9 strikeouts, a few walks. Not the walk numbers are still never going to be high for him, but the strikeouts are coming down, the hits are coming up, and Sosa looks like he can handle major league pitching to an extent recently.
Yeah, and that's his MO everywhere he's been. At every
Yeah.
level, he starts out slow, and there's doubts. Can he hit at this level? And then after 100 at bats, he's dominated every level in the minor leagues. I remember when he first came up to Charlotte. He was so impressive. He's just got a great bat. Good bat to ball skills.
Yeah, he was excellent in Charlotte, and it's not, again, I don't think this is a guy that you're looking at and penciling him in for a starting role necessarily, but at least in the last month, you're seeing adjustments, you're seeing improvements, and you're seeing a guy who looks like he could maybe be a utility infielder, right? And that's something that would be great if he can turn into a major league piece after a really up and down last 2 years of baseball, right? Like that would be awesome for the White Sox. And now a full month sample, right? Yes, the last week or two has been really good. Over the last full month of him being back in the big leagues, in his last 30 games, he's hitting .290, .315 on base percentage, .430 slugging. So, it's a .750 OPS for a guy that can play all over the infield and has looked solid on defense. And that's a player that can be a major league piece. So great to see Lenyn Sosa starting to succeed a little bit. I'm excited to see where things take him. So those 3 all looking good. And like we've said, with all these promotions, Jeff, there's a lot of guys on the way. And before you know it, come August, we're going to see a lot of prospects in the major league team with the White Sox pretty soon. It's going to happen before you know it.
Yeah, absolutely. And spoiler alert, we saw a few new faces in Charlotte this week. It was really exciting.
We did. We certainly did. Before we get into Charlotte, we got a few other things to get to. I want to start by asking you a little bit about your interviews this week. You were in Charlotte. Alan Zinter, who's the director of hitting development for the White Sox, was in Charlotte along with a few other coaching staff development members who were there in Charlotte to welcome in these new guys that are making their way to Charlotte, which we'll get to those guys later. But I want to ask you a little bit about your conversation with Alan and just kind of where you see kind of the White Sox organization feeling like they're at in terms of their hitting development and just and all.
Right. I have seen Alan in Winston-Salem at batting practice, in Kannapolis, and now Charlotte. And every time I've seen him, he's really hands-on. He's behind the cage, and he's talking to every hitter, and just really hands-on. I talked to him a little bit. He's a really knowledgeable guy. And so he was in Charlotte this week, and we had a chance to talk. And I asked him about Colson and Brian Ramos and the fact that I said, the numbers don't look that great, but what are you seeing? And he said, yeah, the numbers aren't that great. He said, but quite frankly, he said, especially in terms of Colson, he said, I'm glad he's struggling, to be honest. He said,
Hmm.
this is the first adversity he's ever faced, probably on a baseball diamond. And he said, and he's doing all the right things. He's working hard. And he seemed really optimistic that, this was going to make Colson a much better player down the road because, look, you're going to big league, major leagues is all about, coping with the loss, putting the bad games behind you, staying with your routine. And Zinner was pretty excited that
Yeah.
he said, Ramos and Colson are struggling, but, they're doing everything they need to be doing right now.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to look at it, honestly. And that's what I've been trying to kind of get at a little bit in the past few months when we talk about Colson, right? And we talk about all these guys. There, it's tough, right? You don't want to see guys struggle. That's never what you want to see. But at the same time, like, it's good to see some things. It's good to see them working through stuff. And Colson's a guy that hasn't had to struggle because he's been incredibly talented his whole career. But it's nice to see, to a degree, him have to work through things and have to figure things out. And that's something that he's going to keep doing. And I've remained confident in both those guys, especially Colson, right? Like, he's incredibly talented. We know that. And I really don't see a reason to doubt what he's doing because he's going to be there and he's going to be continuing to work. And I think you're looking at a guy that's going to be a major leaguer pretty soon. And whatever that happens and whatever form that takes, I think he's going to be pretty successful. So I'm really confident about it. And I'm excited to hear that the White Sox feel the same way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got a high comfort level with Zinter. I just feel like he knows what he's doing. He's got years of experience. He connects well with the players, and like I said, he's really hands on. So I
Yeah.
think he's going to be a big asset to our minor league system.
I'd love to hear that. That's a great thing to hear just for the future of the organization, right? And we love
Yeah.
hearing about positive developments and then the development staff and things feeling like it's going in a good direction right now. So let's dive into all this. We got a lot to talk about. We'll start with our hitter and pitcher of the week, and then we're going to go down by each level because we got to talk promotions, we got to talk players performing, and all of that such stuff before we dive into trade deadline stuff in the coming weeks. Our hitter of the week is pretty obvious, I think. Jeff, you got a guess of who the hitter of the week is?
Man, oh man. I think he's a 6, 7, 18-year-old. That's probably where you're headed with this.
Yeah, he certainly is. George Wolkow was exceptional this week and has been exceptional for the past few weeks, frankly. He was just named to the minor league baseball team of the week by Major League Baseball today. They put out their team of the week. So he was one of the top 3 minor league outfielders in all of baseball this week. So obviously going to be the hitter of the week for us here at Future Sox. George Wolkow on a tear, Jeff. This past week, George Wolkow had a 1647 OPS with 3 home runs, 2 triples and a double, 5 walks as well throughout the week. Wolkow he did everything possible this week, essentially. He just has the development. It's not even just that he's impressive. It's the adjustment period, and having such a quick adjustment period for a guy who's 18, it's just beyond impressive and really, really exciting for to see what the future holds for Wolkow. I was pretty astonished to see what he did this week. I feel like every time I check my phone, I've been out of town this week, so I really haven't watched a lot of games directly. But every time I went through our Future Sox highlights, and shout out to Ian Eskridge, who does a great job putting together highlights for us at Future Sox, and that is for me being out of town this week. That was my way I was catching up with everything. Every time I clicked on the Future Sox page, oh, George Wolkow went deep. Oh, George Wolkow hit a triple down the gap at 107 miles an hour off the bat. I mean, really just ridiculous stuff, Jeff. The power is good, but he also has adjusted the approach. Wolkow looks more comfortable at the plate. Against Fayetteville this week in 6 games, I mean, just absurd stuff. A total of 10 hits in 6 games. The homers were there. The 2 homers to finish off the week this past weekend, both Friday and Saturday, he went deep. The strikeouts are still going to be there, right? He's still going to have strikeouts, and he's still going to have games where he strikes out 3 or 4 times, and he had a 4 strikeout game this week. But then he also had games this week where he had 2 walks in 2 different games this week, which is something we haven't seen from Wolkow. At least early on, we didn't see that. You're starting to see him take better pitches. He's finding his pitches. He's picking his fastballs because he crushes fastballs. So he's being able to recognize pitches and find the pitches he knows he can do damage on. And then when he gets around to a ball, it's going far and it's going hard. And that's the type of hitter he is, right?
Yeah, I think if you're a minor league pitcher, you better have your head examined if you throw him a fastball.
Truly, right? But it's single A, right? And that's the thing. And he's so young that you can't pitch around guys necessarily at that level. But it's it's hard not to because he just is mashing the ball right now. The past 2 weeks in general, just nothing but dominance. The past two series, even last week against Colombia, he had 8 hits in that series, and then proceeds to have 10 hits in the series this week. So 18 hits over his last 12 games. Really just incredible stuff from Wolkow. After striking out really high rates and really not getting on base much in his first week or two in Kannapolis, now you're looking at a guy who is the most scary hitter in that lineup, and a lineup with a lot of talented hitters and a lot of college hitters in that lineup. And you've got 18-year-old George Wolkow, who could have graduated high school a month ago, who's the scariest hitter in that lineup, truly.
Right. Yeah. And he's got a little protection in front and behind him. I
100%.
mean, there are a lot of good bats in that lineup right now.
And we're going to get to a lot of those guys later.
Yeah.
But Wolkow is obviously the hitter of the week. He just looks like he's on another level right now. It's cool to see him really take that next step. And he's going to be in Kannapolis probably the rest of the year. So we're going to keep seeing this from Wolkow. I don't think this is going to stop. I'm not sure he's going to have a 1640 OPS, but this is not going to stop. He's going to keep mashing. We're going to keep seeing some home runs. 8 home runs on the season now. Would it shock you to see? I mean, give him a month more in Kannapolis. I wouldn't be shocked if he has 20 home runs this season as an 18-year-old. It really would not shock me. He's already at 18.
On that pace. Sure.
He's already at 8, and he had 20. He has 10 total when you factor in the complex league. So, I mean, he can get 20 home runs this year as an 18-year-old in affiliated ball, which is silly. I mean, that doesn't happen. That's not a thing. So pretty crazy stuff from Wolkow. Our pitcher of the week, who is one of the many, many promotions in the system. We'll get to kind of all those other promotions later. But Illinois local guy, the two Illinois guys being featured in our hitter and pitcher of the week, which is pretty cool to see. Really goes to show the White Sox, the White Sox scouting development and stuff in their own home and region has been really impressive when you look at a Noah Schultz and you look at George Wolkow, and then a guy they've targeted in a trade in Riley Gowens, who is our pitcher of the week. Gowens is a guy that was drafted last year by the Braves as a senior signing out of University of Illinois, and was brought over and has completely taken his pedigree and name to a totally different level, honestly. And Gowens is someone who this week in his first game in Birmingham goes 5 innings of shutout ball, only 2 hits, not a single walk, and 7 strikeouts for Gowens this week in his first Double-A start. So Riley Gowens has looked excellent. He was really good. The numbers don't really do him justice. The ERA numbers are really not quite accurate for him. This is a guy with a whip of 1 on the season, with 92 strikeouts and only 75 innings. The numbers there are excellent. He had a few games in Winston where he got blew up early in the year, and that kind of spiked the ERA a little bit. But generally speaking, it's really impressive stuff from Gowens. He looks really good. He's finished his last 2 starts strong in Winston, comes to Birmingham this past week, throws a 5-inning shutout in his first start at the level. I can't wait to see what Gowens does. He takes Kai Bush's spot in the rotation. We'll get to Bush in a second, but Gowens pitcher of the week because he made his first start at Double-A in his first professional season, right? He's a little bit older because of when he was drafted, and he had surgery in college. He was drafted later than most guys do. So he's already recently turned. He's already 24. But at 24, regardless, first season in the pros, and he's already in Double-A, and he's already looking good in Double-A.
Have you seen him pitch this season?
Not in person. I have not, but I've watched.
Have you watched a game on TV?
For sure. Yeah, I've watched him.
And what do you see from him?
It's impressive stuff. So I also did an interview with him, and he was able to he broke it down for me really carefully about a month ago, which people can go listen to if they want to learn about him. But this is a guy who really trusts his fastball and his slider. He loves the fastball. He loves the slider. He's comfortable throwing the fastball high. He really loves to attack that top part of the zone with the fastball. But this offseason, what the White Sox did and what Brian Bannister did is what he told me about is they added a curveball for him. So he was always this fastball slider guy. He didn't have a lot of secondary, a third or fourth pitch. He had a changeup. He's worked with other stuff, but he was never comfortable fully is what he told me. He told me this directly, that he always was really trusted his fastball slider and never really had to do more than that because he was able to get away with that in college. Now he adds this curveball. He really has taken his strikeout numbers to another level because of this curveball. He loves that nice little, high fastball, pairing it off of a 12-6 style curveball, and then you get the drift on a slider, right? So that triple pairing to him, most guys you don't see really throwing a breaking ball that often, right? But his 2 breaking balls, he probably throws between the slider and the curveball, he's probably throwing 40-50% breaking balls, which is not common, but it's working really well for him. And that curveball has added a whole other layer to his game where he's got that high fastball that really has some ride to it. He's got that dropping off curveball, and then he's got the movement to get guys off balance with the slider. So really cool stuff. I like the way he throws. I'm excited to see him in person at some point soon because he looks really impressive to me, and he looks like he's going to fit in Birmingham.
Yeah, and that was a great interview. I would suggest people go back and listen to that. You learn a lot about a minor league pitcher and what they're thinking, and Yeah,
100%. Yeah,
definitely
no,
delivered.
that was a great one. So Gowens, his first debut in Birmingham, a great start for him. He is our pitcher of the week because of that start. Going down to AAA, Jeff, the Charlotte Knights might be the most exciting they've been in quite some time. You tell me. You tell me if you remember a team more exciting than the current Charlotte Knights.
Not even close.
Yeah,
Not even close. Oh, what an exciting week. We
yeah,
had well, we haven't even seen Kai Bush pitch
right,
yet because
right in the leg.
he got bumped, and then they got a rain out. So we'll probably get to see him this week. I'm guessing
Probably.
Clevenger will pitch Tuesday,
Yeah, either tomorrow or Tuesday or Wednesday.
and
Yeah,
then Bush on Wednesday. So that'll
yeah.
be
So
exciting.
Kai Bush makes his way to Charlotte. That's the
Yep.
first one. That was the first one to break last week. We got news of that. Kai Bush, has been good all season. He's an older guy. He's had some experience in Double A, but this is a guy who this was the same thing with him and Jake Eater. Both they came over last year. He struggled. He couldn't find his footing last year, but still just 24 years old and has a 2.12 ERA this season in 14 games in Birmingham. Not quite as good as Thorpe, but still exceptional, right? 1.03 WHIP. Really good numbers all season from Bush. Just solid, consistent innings from this guy throughout the year. Deserves a chance in Charlotte. I think he'll be. Do you think he's in Chicago post deadline? I don't think it's too far off. Maybe not quite post deadline, but fairly soon he's going to be in Chicago, right?
Well, I guess he's moved to the top of the queue as the next man up, right? I mean, he's probably past Nastrini, and Mason Adams is still in Birmingham. So I guess he's next man up.
Yeah, we'll see what happens on that front, but it's definitely, sooner than later, he's going to get a shot. I think he definitely will get a shot this year at least. So excited to see what Bush can do. And then two hitters that we have been loving watching all season in Birmingham both get the bump on the same day to Charlotte, which is pretty awesome to see. Top catching prospect Edgar Quero, who's a consensus top 100 prospect in baseball. It was only a matter of time for Quero. I know he's still young, and they really wanted him to finish out the first half of the season with that Birmingham team. And from what I've heard, all indications are that they knew guys were ready, but they've been waiting for those promotions to let those guys clinch a playoff spot, let them play together, have that moment, have that celebration, right? But then it's time to go, right? Like those guys are just, he's too good. Regardless of his age, Carroll, only 21 years old, has simply just been great all season. He had a little bit of a slump in May, but started the season incredible, had a wonderful month of June, and is just very clearly ready for a chance in Charlotte. And then on the flip side, Brooks Baldwin, probably the top, if not, him and Mason Adams are probably the top two breakout candidates this season per se. Baldwin, a 23-year-old utility shortstop, infielder, all of the above type of guy, has hitting 328 this year, which is not something that people do. I'm not a big batting average guy, right? But that's still insane. Both these guys get to Charlotte, they make an immediate impact. They both go deep in their first game with Charlotte. Brooks Baldwin in his first at bat in AAA goes deep. First pitch he sees in AAA goes deep, and then Edgar Quero goes deep later that game. It's just these two deserve it. These two are going to be 2025 Chicago White Sox players.
The lineup, it's so exciting. I've suffered through so many nights games when it's just all these veterans who are either on the way down or passing through Charlotte. But now you've got a lineup. You've got Ramos, Olson Montgomery, and Baldwin on the infield. You got Quero behind the plate. You got Zach Deloach in the outfield and Oscar Colas. It's just
It's
so exciting. And then
it's a
you've got
totally
a bunch
different
of
team.
young arms on the mound.
Yeah, it's a totally different team. I mean, it couldn't be more different from the beginning of the season. We were looking at the Charlotte roster at the beginning of the season. And we were like, man, this is really rough to watch. And now you're looking at a team that has put some wins together. Like I said, only 8 games under 500. Like this could be a winning AAA team by the end of the second half of the season, right? Like the second half, they could legitimately be a competitive playoff contending type of team. I mean, they look really good.
Yeah, I mean, I think it all comes down to, this team will always score. I don't care if it's veterans or prospects.
Right.
You'll score in Charlotte. It all comes down to starting pitching. And, even if they bump a couple of guys after the deadline, they'll bump a couple of more guys up from Birmingham who are having great
Yep.
years. So, yeah,
100%.
you're right. The pitching looks solid for the rest of the year.
Yeah, definitely. It looks like it's going to be really good. I mean, Bush there, Sean Burke has had some good starts coming off of his rehab. Nick Nastrini still had some better starts lately than he did earlier in the season. Still another guy that I'm very hopeful for, right? So it's exciting. It's feeling good. It's looking good. Charlotte is in a great spot. Those three guys are really going to make an impact. I think Baldwin and Quero are really going to continue to hit there. I mean, those two, the way those two have hit in Birmingham, right? You put those guys in a park like Charlotte, we're going to see the power from Quero. We're going to see Baldwin tap into even more power. Both those guys, I think, are going to be really successful down the stretch. And do you think those two, either or, are a candidate for a late season call-up, Jeff?
Well, that's interesting. Maybe I think it's reasonable to expect that they get maybe they're one of the 3 September call-ups
Yeah.
just so they can see what it's all about in the major leagues. I think that's really beneficial.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking the same thing. It's just it'll come down to the 40 man. It'll come down to the trade deadline as well, depending on how many guys get moved off the roster. But assuming there's roster spots open, Quero is a little more like I'm not sure you need to really. I think he's still really young. I mean, he's 21, right? If you just let that guy mash in Charlotte, you can still go into 2025 with him like preparing to be a major league catcher, right? I wouldn't mind it for a few games, but Baldwin is the type of guy where I almost feel like you just want to keep the lightning in a bottle with him because it's been such an impressive year. I almost feel like you just have to put him up in September and just see what happens and just give him
Yeah.
a shot to earn a 2025 roster spot because he's been that good all season. And also just, somebody that wasn't expected to be that good necessarily, right? Like when you have some prospects that are late round guys that just develop in such an impressive way, you almost want to just capitalize on that and just keep it rolling. So with Baldwin, if he hits really well throughout August, throughout July, and then August in Charlotte, I think he's a guy that I would really like to see, honestly, get some major league innings in September.
Yeah. And, I talked to some of these guys who get drafted, and then for the last month of the season, they come to Kannapolis, and maybe they play, and sometimes they don't even play. They just observe. But they all tell me the next year that how beneficial that those few weeks in Kannapolis are.
Yeah.
And you got to think that that's exactly the case in the big leagues.
Yeah, I mean, look at Wolkow last year, right? Wolkow went up to Kannapolis last year,
Yeah.
barely played. He got like 2 games in or whatever. Comes up this year and is smashing right now. So I mean, it's cool to see. I think Baldwin and Quero and Bush all very deserving of promotions. Very excited to see kind of where things take them. But they're all going to be big league pieces for the White Sox in 2025, and they're knocking on the door now. So we got more and more prospects, not truly knocking on the door in Charlotte right now. Heading down to Birmingham, those 3 left a big hole in Birmingham, that's for sure. So there's
Yeah.
3 really impressive, really talented players that kind of that left the team in Birmingham, and now you got to fill that hole, right? So it's going to be a little tricky, but let's not forget there's plenty of talent still in Birmingham, even without those 3 there. Starting with the rotation, now that Bush is gone, right? Riley Gowens fills his spot, so still a very, very strong rotation there, even with Gowens inserted in the Bush's spot. You still got that top 3 of Adams, Eater, and Iriarte in terms of some older guys. They're more advanced, right? Eater, I think, has struggled a bit recently. I think Jake Eater probably gets up to Charlotte late in the season. I don't see him as an option in Chicago. Mason Adams, is he behind Bush at all? I don't really think he is. I just think it was somebody had to go up first and then somebody's going to be next. But Adams should be up pretty soon, I think. I would have to think he'd be up pretty soon. And then from there, it's Cairo Iriarte also is the youngest of those 3, but is someone who still should get a shot next year. I don't think it's this year either in the major leagues for Iriarte. I think he's had some things he's had to work through this year. So I think he's probably looking at a 2025 debut. But those 3 are all leading the way. And then you get to a Noah Schultz, he's Noah Schultz, right? He's special.
Yeah, and I think the prospect world is finally on to him.
Yep.
I mean, we've heard people talk about him as the top minor league lefty.
He's ranked as such now in most places, yeah, which is
Yeah,
pretty crazy.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he
And
checked in as number 8th
speaking of
overall.
lefties, I'm sorry.
No, I think he checked in at number 8th overall on Baseball America's Top 100. So Schultz is getting the recognition he deserves, and very deservingly.
And there's another lefty in
Yep.
Birmingham who's also doing well. I want, maybe what's in the water in Birmingham? These guys come up from Winston and they're lights out.
Yeah, it's a pitcher-friendly league, so you have to take some things with a slight grain of salt, right?
Yeah.
Southern League is kind of the most pitching-heavy league in baseball right now. But at the same time, I don't care. I'm enjoying what I'm seeing, and they're all throwing really well. Tyler Schweitzer is another guy, like you just said, another left-hander who fills out that rotation as a kind of a high floor lefty, right? But has just been good, and you can't deny that he's just continually been good. So it's hard to doubt what any of these guys are doing right now, and this rotation continues to dominate. I don't think Schultz is going anywhere. I don't think Gowens is going anywhere. I don't think Schweitzer is going anywhere. But any of those top 3 in Adams, Iriarte, and Eater could be on their way to Charlotte in the near future as well. And I think Adams is probably the first in that line because he's just been exceptional. So I'm excited to see what Adams. I mean, I think Adams is a guy that could be in Chicago with Bush come August, September, right?
Yeah, he's got to come to Charlotte after the deadline at the latest. I mean, yeah. I mean, he's just having a stellar year.
Yeah, no, he absolutely has to. I completely agree with you. So, I mean, that rotation is so much fun to watch. We just it can, even without Bush now and even without Thorpe now, it's still just such a fun rotation with Schultz up there now, with Schweitzer up there now, and now with Gowens getting there. Like they just every day you can tune into a Birmingham game and see a pitcher that you really enjoy watching, and it's exciting to watch. Let's talk a little bit about the offensive side of things in Birmingham because they've got some roster spots to fill, right? So you start the season with a Brian Ramos at third, with Brooks Baldwin at short, and then with an Edgar Quero behind the plate. Jacob Gonzalez came up a month ago, so now without Baldwin there, Gonzalez will be the everyday shortstop. They were kind of switching off a little bit. Gonzalez was playing a lot of short, but Baldwin was sometimes playing second. Gonzalez will play some third. Gonzalez will play some second. They were all moving around, but now you've got Gonzalez kind of penciled into short. You really let him cook. He's had a rough few weeks, honestly. I think he's getting hit by some of the the adjustment period. Transitioning as a hitter into Double A can be often really challenging, and after a really hot start, he's slowed down a little bit. But Gonzalez is still a guy that you're looking at as a 2025 major league option. He'll finish the year in Birmingham, I think. He should finish the year down there. Just keep working, facing those high-level pitchers, right? This is still his first professional season after all, right? So let's give him the time, but he's going to be at shortstop, so you don't have to worry about that position. On the flip side of that, you got to fill some spots. You got to fill some catching innings, and you really got to fill some second and third base innings now that you don't have a Baldwin there, you don't have a Ramos there, right? And, so I think catching, right? Michael Turner seems like the obvious solution. He's been the backup there all year, but then this week, Michael Turner, gets the starting reps and he starts hitting well. And I think, his offensive numbers this season don't look good, but I think that he's the type of guy who, once he starts to get regular innings like he was last year in Winston-Salem, you're going to start to see Michael Turner really turn it up. And he immediately did that this week. This is a guy that we talked about coming into the season as one of our favorite non-Edgar Quero catchers in the system. And I think now we're going to see Turner really get that full-time catching job in Birmingham. Does that seem accurate?
Yeah, that sounds right. We got 4 catchers now here in Charlotte. It's
Right.
getting a little crowded, but again,
Carlos Perez just went on the dev list, so that was one off.
yeah,
But
yeah.
So we'll see what happens with Turner.
Right. Elijah, do you see anyone in Winston who's ready to come up and fill in some of these holes in the lineup in Birmingham?
Yeah, that's what's tricky with Winston. So
Yeah.
Winston is kind of that spot where there's not really that many guys in Winston that we see as being ready for the next level. Winston, the team hasn't been bad overall, but nobody's been, other than Jacob Gonzalez when he was there, nobody's really been standing out in Winston in terms of the offense. So it's interesting to consider. I think catching-wise, I wouldn't be surprised to see Kobe Smelly. Kobe Smelly has been really good in Winston actually this year. Pretty under-the-radar guy that has actually impressed all season in Winston. I think Smelly, I think generally Turner's going to get first cracks. And like I just mentioned Turner, I want to just mention this briefly, that Turner had 6 hits this week once he became the starter. So he started 5 games this week after Quero went up, and he had 6 hits already in addition to 2 walks. So, Turner's going to be the starter there in Birmingham, but I think Smelly could be a guy that could fit really well. He has an 822 OPS. He's hitting 302 this season, 2021 draft pick. So he's an older guy too. He's been around a little bit, but I think Smelly could kind of fill some innings at catcher. And then on the other side of things, like, I don't know. I mean, I think the one option and the guy that we're going to mention as we're about to get down to Winston, like, is it Wes Kath, right? Like, is it almost time for that? I don't know. I think Wes Kath it's tricky because you don't want to stunt him considering he's kind of having his first good season professionally right now. But at the same time, like, he has been in Winston for 2 entire seasons now. I wouldn't mind seeing it this week. Kath had over an 1100 OPS this past week. He's up and down for sure. He has not the most consistent season. Definitely still a streaky hitter. Definitely still strikes out too much. But this past week in Winston, Kath had, let's see, in 6 games this week, Kath had 8 hits, including 3 doubles and 3 doubles, 2 home runs. So 5 extra base hits across 6 games this week. Good for an OPS over 1100 this past week. So considering second and third are both kind of open holes in Birmingham right now, you've got a Jason Matthews who's been okay and Alexander Womack, but there really is not anybody that you're excited about at those positions right now in Birmingham. Is Wes Kath ready for a shot at third base in Birmingham?
I wouldn't be surprised if he stays in Winston all year. I wouldn't be surprised if we see him in Birmingham next week. But here's the guy I think I'd like to see in Birmingham.
I know who you're going to go. I know who you're going to say. I'm curious.
Do you think there's any way Nishida skips Winston?
Huh.
Because they need, he can play all over the diamond.
That's an interesting idea, Jeff. I didn't think you were going that direction. I just thought of a name in Winston who I thought you were going to go with. But Nishida's fascinating because he could be slot into second base there. Birmingham also could use a little bit of outfield help. I mean, they've got Tatum, they've got Burke, they've got some outfielders there. But Nishida as a second base, left field kind of combo type thing could be kind of fascinating there. I don't know if he skips. I think it might be a little too aggressive for a player of his style and his play style. I think it might just be a little too hard. But at the same time, I wouldn't mind a hitter at the top of that or in that lineup who can just get walks and just work counts and just kind of set up some of those other hitters to be even more productive, right? It would definitely benefit guys like Elko and Tatum and some of those other hitters that are still there, and Gonzalez, right? Like having a guy who can just come up and work counts and make pitchers uncomfortable would probably benefit some of those older hitters in Birmingham. Actually,
he invigorates the lineup. I mean, he finds ways to get on. He walks more than he strikes out. A lot of contact, a lot of speed.
That's an interesting idea, Jeff. Definitely one to consider. I thought you were going to go with Sean Gusenberg. That's kind of where I thought you were going to go that direction, because Gusenberg is not a super high level prospect by any means, but Gusenberg has been productive all year. I mean, has maintained an OPS of 800 or higher pretty much all season in Winston. He was solid in Winston last year when he's been in Winston for two full seasons now. He got up to Winston in 2022, so really over 2 years at this point he's been in Winston, and he's been pretty productive. It's not like he's been bad. 808 OPS this year. He's got some power. He's got some a little bit of speed. He strikes out a lot, but generally speaking, I think Gusenberg's a guy that you could plug into the lineup as an option, at least in Birmingham, and he would be decently productive. So that's a guy I could see. But ultimately, Jeff, I think you're going to fill out this roster naturally. I think Birmingham's roster is just kind of going to fill itself naturally by the draft, by the trade deadline. I mean, if the White Sox, it depends which route they go, right? The two options of the draft, like we heard from Pete last week, there's the option where they go Connor Griffin and they just go full young, the highest upside high school guy, and they just lean into the future. But there's also an option. They have an incredibly talented college hitter available at the 5th overall pick. A guy like Jack Coglione, a guy like Charlie Condon, those guys would be in Birmingham probably this season, to be honest, which is crazy to think about. But you're going to get in August or September, if you go the college route in the draft, the 5th pick, whoever that college superstar hitter is could easily be a star in Birmingham by the end of the season. So there's and then the trade deadline, right? You look at the deadline, and the White Sox are going to be targeting, right, high A, double A type hitters. That's going to be the pure target of this entire trade deadline, is going to be hitters that have a ton of upside and are already past that lower level, right? They might get some ACL, some rookie ball type guys, but somebody in this trade deadline is going to be a high end, high A, double A type hitting prospect. You're going to get at least one, if not 2 or 3 of those types of players in this trade deadline. So,
and very likely one of them is going to be a middle infielder who's going to fill that gap in Birmingham. Absolutely.
And an outfielder who can also fill that third outfield spot in Birmingham, right?
But, if for some reason that doesn't happen, I can see Sean Gusenberg. I mean, I think he deserves it.
He does.
In terms of middle infield, maybe it's Mario Camilletti or Jordan Sprinkle, but
it could work, but Gusenberg has played some other spots. This year, I know he's mostly been playing first and the outfield, right? But Gusenberg's played left and right field, so you could put those guys in a corner. You can put him in a corner outfield. He's played a little second base, so you could try him out there a little bit. You could mess around with him at first base and Elko DHing, or him DHing Elko at first, and then you could put Veras back in the outfield. So I mean, they can play around with positions, but I think Gusenberg is probably an easy filler guy to fill out that lineup a little bit, and then you're going to get guys at the deadline that are going to be good in Birmingham. So I'm really not too worried about it. And like you said, like I was saying earlier, it sucks to lose Edgar Quero, and that's a guy who's really been huge for some of those pitchers, but Michael Turner is also a very good defensive catcher and a guy who really knows how to catch. So the pitching staff's going to be in good hands with him behind the dish.
Yeah, absolutely.
So going down to Winston, we kind of just touched on Westcast with a big week. Filling in Riley Gowens' spot in Winston, who goes up to Birmingham, was Tommy Vale. Tommy Vale's an interesting name to mention because he's definitely not a guy that has a super prospect pedigree. He was an undrafted guy, 25 years old, so he's definitely an older guy. He's already been through some arm injuries. He's kind of been through a lot. But when you look at the numbers at the surface level this year, 2024 stats: 15 games pitched, a 1.66 ERA across 38 innings, 66 strikeouts in those 38 innings. 0.89 whip. Vale has just been exceptional all season. So it's deserving. It's a deserving promotion. He was a reliever for most of the year in Candy just because there's so many starters there that are so talented. But I think he's going to now be kind of that third rotation guy. And his first game with Winston-Salem this week, he throws a 5-inning, 1-run game with 10 strikeouts. So Vale looks good, and I'm excited to actually get to see a few starts of him. I haven't watched too much of him this season, but I think his numbers look exceptional, and I think he seems like he deserves to be in Winston and will be a kind of a good rotation piece for them now.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder if maybe he wasn't in the rotation in part because they wanted to slowly stretch him out. But yeah, he's a guy that wasn't on my radar, and all of a sudden they put him in the rotation in Kannapolis, and he just kills it. And I thought, wow, who is this guy? He looks really good. And then they bump him up to Winston, and he keeps it going. So yet another exciting pop up prospect.
Yeah, exactly. So that's all I got in Winston. Anybody else that you kind of are keeping your eye on in Winston right now? We kind of just went through the roster when looking at possible promotions, but
Not really. The rotation. There's Peyton
oh,
Follett has moved to the bullpen.
yes, one interest. That's definitely an interesting note because I'm not
Yeah,
sure if it'll be permanent, but it's interesting to see Paulette get some bullpen innings because I've kind of mentioned to you a few times that I could see him not just adjusting, but really thriving as a reliever because Paulette really has not been able to find the zone this year. But I think that's the type of guy who the stuff we saw from him 2 years ago, if you put him in kind of that, that late relief role and you say, hey, we need an inning out of you. Let's get the velo up. Let's get some of the stuff up and really just attack. That's the type of guy who I think could thrive in a bullpen role. So I'm curious to see how that'll go for Paulette.
yeah, yeah.
Moving down to Kannapolis, another good week. We talked about Wolkow off the top. Wolkow was unbelievable, but the whole lineup in Canny was great this week, Jeff. I mean, really, really, really strong week from Canny. All things considered, it was just good overall for them. I think a lot of guys in that lineup hit. We'll start with your guy Riku Nishida because you just mentioned the possibility of him being in Birmingham, which now I'm kind of curious about. But Nishida's a guy that it's such a unique profile, one of the most unique profiles you'll ever see. He already has 34 stolen bases this year. In addition to, 55 walks and only 43 strikeouts. Nishida's just such a fascinating player. Crazy good plate approach. Has an on-base potential over 400 because of that. He's got super crazy speed. The impact with the bat will always be low, but could it get higher? You never know, right? It's hard to gauge. We'll see what happens. But this past week, Nishida had a 5-hit game. What was that, Friday or Saturday?
Yeah. It's just an exciting player. I've been to a lot of Kannapolis games this year, in part because up until recently the Knights didn't have that many prospects, and so he is just so much fun to watch. In every game, every at bat is the same. He'll never swing at that first pitch. He'll take a lot of pitches. He'll foul pitches off. I've seen
Right.
him see 8 or 9 pitches until he finally gets a walk.
Right, no, 100%. And the whole lineup was great in Candy this week, in addition to Nishida. Going down the line, Caden Connor's a guy that we've been kind of saying all year, has been good. I really don't get why he's not in Winston already. I think maybe because there's a little bit of a logjam with the outfield in Winston, just because that's the one position there where they're a little bit heavy on is the outfield and the corner infields. So it's kind of but Connor also, Connor's played right, he's played left, he's played first base. Let's get him a roster spot up there. I really don't see any reason for a guy like Connor to be in Kannapolis still. But a 936 OPS for Connor this past week. Just consistent hits. He had 6 walks this week. He knows how to work counts. He knows how to find his pitches. Another guy that I was able to interview a few months ago and was just a great guy to talk to and just hear about kind of his path. But Connor has been awesome all season. Same with Nishida. Both those guys, I don't think it's Birmingham yet, but I think both those guys should be in Winston for the second half of the season pretty soon. I really don't see why not at this point. And then beyond that, a few other guys that kind of are worth taking note of this past week. Ronnie Hernandez this week had an 1136 OPS in his past 7 days. That's a guy who really, really turned it up. 9 hits, in his last 4 games to finish out the week this week. So Ronnie Hernandez has looked really good. That's a guy who, we've talked about him before. Another catcher in the system who is worth at least keeping an eye on, right? 19 years old in Kannapolis, spending the entire season in Candy this year after being in the ACL last year. Last year he was incredible in the ACL, and he hasn't been great this year, but all things considered, an OPS over 700, 39 walks to only 34 strikeouts for a guy who's 19 years old in single A and developing as a catcher. And we heard it from Pat Leland. This is a guy who's working really hard to be a good catcher, and it seems like he's really growing as a catcher throughout this year. So Ronnie Hernandez is a guy that I've always kind of liked him, and I've liked what I've saw from him. I really like the way he swings the bat. So I'm excited to see where things go for Hernandez as he starts to tap into a little bit more strength and power, and he ages a little more.
Yeah. He's, Pat was enthusiastic about him, and Ronnie's just gotten better and better every week this year, and he looks like he's really hitting his stride now. And then 2 other guys, just to quickly point out, is Arxie Hernandez and Mikey Kane. Both of those guys have really been hitting a lot
Yeah,
here in the
Kane's an
last 2
interesting one.
weeks in particular.
Yeah, both those guys have been hitting well. Mikey Kane's an interesting one because he missed the first part of the season with an injury. This was a guy who was drafted last year, late round, 17th round pick. Like we've talked about, a lot of these late round guys have really started to show something for the White Sox in the past few drafts. And Mikey Kane now, after starting the season on the IL, has really bounced back well in the past few weeks, especially. Has looked like a really solid hitter. So another guy that he's tapped into some power recently, 5 home runs, 8 doubles this season in only 44 games, right? So Mikey Kane has looked really good recently. This past week, he had in his past 5 games, he had a 1052 OPS for Kane. So some really good stuff throughout that entire lineup. Just a team that just looks good. Everything about that team just looks really solid. And it's cool to get to see kind of where that's heading. Anybody else in Kenny you've got your eye on? I think that's just about. Oh, I want a pitching side.
The pitching side for sure. Right? I mean, we got 3 guys in that rotation down there who are just killing it. Lucas Gordon, Seth Keener, and Aldrin Batista. They haven't missed a start this year too, and that's important. I mean,
100%. I was just thinking that.
They got, I think, 2 of the starters in Kannapolis have 13 starts. 2 of them have 14. Gordon and Batista both with 7 wins. And Keener only 4 wins, but, I mean, he's got some really impressive stats.
Especially recently.
Yeah. I mean, he's just been killing it recently.
Yeah, this past week, Aldrin Batista threw a shutout. That was the one game I was able to watch a lot of the clips from this past week. Batista looked great. He's had an up and down last few weeks. I think he started the season really strong, and I was really, really excited about him. I'm still really excited about him, but he's definitely had some command issues recently in some games. But this past week, he limits the damage, 3 hits, or 2 hits, 3 walks, 7 strikeouts, no runs, 5 innings shutout for Batista this past week. So a really good start from him, kind of bounced back off of a recent shaky start. His past start was a little bit shaky. So good to see him bounce back well with another strong start from Batista. Now 2 of his last 3 starts have bbeen really, really good. So Batista looks great. Keener and Gordon are guys that it's another example of do these guys really need to be in Kannapolis still? I get it. The rotation's tough, but I'm hoping that with Paulette potentially moving to the bullpen and then Gowens going up, I'm thinking at least one of those 2 college guys with Keener and Gordon should be heading up to Winston pretty soon. I know Davis Martin's in Winston right now. I guess we should mention that as well. Davis Martin is rehabbing in Winston right now. Davis Martin is going to get probably 2 or 3 or 4 starts in Winston maybe, but I'm assuming that with Paulette out in the bullpen, Davis Martin, once he goes back up to Charlotte potentially or Birmingham, wherever he goes next in his rehab, Keener and Gordon gotta get some innings in Winston this year. They're just too advanced and too old as prospects, too just experienced really to be pitching the whole season in Kannapolis.
Yeah, Winston's, as you pointed out earlier, Winston's kind of the logjam both for hitters and pitchers in Kannapolis who need to move up. But I have to think the Sox are going to prioritize getting those 3 pitchers to Winston and keep them moving. Yeah. And same thing with a guy like Caden Connor. They'll find a way.
It's going to happen, especially with the deadline coming. You're going to see things start to trickle up, and guys we saw it this week. This was the start of it, so we already got a little taste of it. But all of these guys in Canny, I think you can look at Canny and say that there's at least 5 or more players you can circle on that roster and say these guys need to get some innings at the next level this season. I think it's pretty much a lock for both Keener and Gordon. I think you could pretty much lock Nishida and Caden Connor. I think Batista's right behind them. I think, you could even argue some of those Nick Altermat, some of the relievers, Luke Bell. I mean, there's really a lot of guys on that roster that should be pitching in Winston or hitting in Winston both ways, sooner than later. So I think Canny's a great team and they continue to play well, but those guys, a lot of that team needs to get moving because they're just simply too good and too advanced to be playing in single A right now.
And Elijah, you mentioned Davis Martin, and when he comes to Charlotte, look at how young the rotation is going to be. Nick Nastrini, Sean Burke, Davis Martin, Johan Dominguez, and
Guy Bush.
And Bush.
And then probably Adams. So
I have never seen a rotation like that in Charlotte. That is so exciting.
It's about time.
It's a new organization.
100%, Jeff. It is really exciting to look at up and down the system and just see where things are at right now. I'm fired up about it. I know you are too. We are going to get to a lot more trade deadline stuff next week and the week after probably. We're going to really dive into it. The MLB draft is on this coming Sunday, the 14th. James Fox, Ian Eskridge, and myself will be on a live talking about the draft. James and Ian are going to kick that off. I'm going to hop in to talk about the 5th pick, jump in and just really dive into that whole draft. We're going to have a lot of fun. So definitely whoever's around on Sunday trying to follow with the draft, draft, make sure to check out that FutureSox live stream we'll be doing for the draft. Jeff and I will be back next Monday. We'll talk about the draft, we'll recap the draft, and then we'll dive into some deadline stuff, some other things. I think the week after that, in 2 weeks from now, we will do an entire trade deadline breakdown analysis, preview, predictions, all of the above. That'll be super fun. My Edgar Quero mock trades piece went up a few days ago. That was fun to get some feedback. A lot of people that didn't like the ideas, but that's how it goes when you make mock trades. Nobody's going to like mock trades, but sometimes they end up being pretty accurate. So before we let everyone go for today, Jeff, what do you think is going to happen at the deadline? Where are you at right now? How do you see things playing out a month away from 3 weeks away from the deadline at this point?
Well, as I said, I think a week ago on our podcast, the White Sox have set the bar high for what we expect to see them bring back in return after last year. I mean, after that haul last year, if they can come anywhere close to duplicating that on hitters in particular, you're gonna see what maybe two, especially if they move Robert, then we're going to see some serious talent. But even with Crochet and some of the other guys, we could see one or two, or if they move Robert, 3 top 50 prospects come into the White Sox organization.
Yeah, you're 100% right. I think it's going to be pretty crazy to see. I mean, they're looking at, like, right now this is a top. I don't feel even hesitant saying this. Like, right now this is a top 10 system in baseball, even with a lack of some hitting depth. I think we've said this before. Like, there's not a lack. There is a lack of some upside hitters in the system. There's a few, but there's definitely not a ton of high level hitting prospects. That's going to change, Jeff. I really am pretty confident you're going to see 2, maybe 3 high-end hitting prospects join the system, whether it be via Crochet. I mean, even at this point, even Eric Fetty is going to return a top 100 prospect, right? Like, Eric Fetty's been exceptional this season. You look at his numbers side by side with Garrett Crochet, and he's only a step behind Garrett Crochet, who's an all-star, right? So we'll see what happens, but I really do think that you're going to see some serious talent added to an already strong farm system, especially on the hitting side of things. And I'm more excited for that because we do have some hitters we like, but adding some hitters straight into Winston and Birmingham that are high-end upside guys is going to make for a very, very fun August and September with the White Sox farm system.
And as you pointed out, that number 5 pick, that guy, I mean, that's going to be a top 50 player. Just even before he has his first pro at bat, he'll be ranked in the top 50.
Exactly, and we'll see what happens. But there's a good chance it's going to be one of those high-end college guys. The way it looks right now, in my opinion, I think. I don't know. I'm not a draft expert, and I've been listening to Pete Flaherty and the other guys that know the draft better than I do. But I think the Rockies go pitcher at number 3 because the Rockies always need pitching, and that leaves 4 hitters for 4 picks between Travis Bazzana, Charlie Condon, Jack Coglione, and JJ Weatherholt. Any of those 4 guys would instantly become one of the best prospects in the White Sox system, and all 4 of those guys are going to move very quickly. I think those 4 hitters, if any of those guys end up being drafted by the White Sox, they will be in Birmingham by the end of the season, which is pretty exciting when you really think about it. And if it ends up being Connor Griffin, that's great too. That's an incredibly high upside hitter who you pair that guy with George Wolkow in Kannapolis, and you've got an super exciting pair of 18-year-olds in Kannapolis that are just mashing 18-year-old outfielders. I mean, that would also be really cool to watch. So we'll see what happens, but there's a lot of talent on the way, Jeff.
One last note before we get out of here. So not only did Brooks Baldwin and Quero come to Charlotte, but along with them came 3 roving instructors. We mentioned Alan Zinter, but also Mike Daniel, who does outfield and base running, and Matt Zielinski on the pitching side. And for people who might not be aware, the White Sox have a bushel of roving instructors. Julio Mosquera for catching, and Brian Newman comes up from Arizona on occasion. These are all really good baseball guys. And so at least 3 of them, at least 3 that I recognize, were in Charlotte this week, which I thought was amusing, following the high-end prospects. But I had a chance to talk to Mike Daniel. I said, where have you been? What have you seen? And he said, well, I was in the DSL and I was out in Arizona. And I said, who impressed you in Arizona? And he said, he saw Mogollon hit a ball over the batter's eye he said that guy is small, but he really has a lot of power. So.
That's a guy we've had an eye on for a while. So Javier Mogollon is someone that we'll definitely be keeping an eye on in rookie ball because he's got a ton of talent. And same with Eduardo Herrera, who I'm excited to see with a top international signing from this past year. We'll have a chance, later in this season to really dive into some of those rookie ball guys. And I want to watch some more film myself and really, inform myself on some of those guys because there's always more talent coming. And that's what we love covering and keeping our eye on for sure.
Sounds great.
All right.
Sounds great.
That will do it for this week. We will talk to you all next week. I'll talk to you Sunday for the draft during the draft. And then me and Jeff will be back. Our normal episode will come out next Tuesday morning where we'll dive into our reactions from the draft in addition to some deadline talk and everything else going on in the system leading up to the end of the month where we're going to have even more to talk about. So we will talk to you next week. And that is all for the Future Sox Roundup.